Happy New Year, everybody. Today we are starting a live read through of The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by me, under the new pen name S.E. Johnson. I will be reading all 552 pages, not today, but in the series. I want to do reading every day, but I'm not sure if I will get through it. For those of you that are interested in reading the book and not having to wait for me to read it to you, there are links down in the doobly-doo. I have links for Amazon. I have links for signed copies for the US and for the UK. Yes, the UK shipping is exorbitant. Whatever I do not spend on shipping, I will refund to you. I will also send you a screenshot of how much I paid on the shipping so you know exactly how much. So yes, it is exorbitant at $100. But the last time I shipped one book to the UK, it was $70. So I'm adding $70 to the cost of it. I won't be looking at chat while I'm reading, but I will be stopping to plug the book and where you can buy it at every subchapter. This is a found family mosaic, meaning that every single chapter starts over from a different character's point of view. It is third person close. And I'm going to start off this live reading by reading some of the blurbs that I got from people who read the book in advance. The first one is from Douglas Clegg, author of Neverland and The Hour Before Dark. Douglas Clegg says, "Prepare to board the runaway train of the last freak show as it speeds through an American century with a wonderful and lunatic troupe of misfits and oddities, and the human spirit in all its..." Hang on, it's a little blurry on the back of the book, but anyways, let me read it from here. Let's see here. Okay. Also, my eye's still wonky. It's not going to get any better. Anyways, okay. So Douglas Clegg had this to say about the book. Prepare to board the runaway train of the last freak show as it speeds through an American century with a wonderful and lunatic troupe of misfits and oddities, and the human spirit in all its absurd beauty. A huge, sprawling, yet cohesive page-turner, S.E. Johnson's epic is at turns brilliant, hilarious, heartbreaking, disturbing, and constantly surprising. This is no sideshow. The Last Freak Show is the real deal, the big top, the main event. Next, we have a blurb from Josh Boone, director of The Fault in Our Stars. He said, "If John Irving and Stephen King collaborated on a century-spanning American epic while channeling Ray Bradbury's Ghost, this is the book you would get. S.E. Johnson is an absolutely dazzling, virtuoso storyteller who has planted his flag with this hugely imaginative, tender, and bruising saga of the Cortez family carnival, sure to be discovered and championed as an absolute classic." Josh Boone, director of The Fault in Our Stars. Last one is from Daniel Barnett, author of the Nightmare Land Chronicles. He had this to say: "Part generational found family mosaic, part magical realism reservoir, and a little bit of everything else, The Last Freak Show is a big book. Big in scope, big in character, biggest of all in heart. Grab your ticket. Johnson's debut is one show that's worth the price of admission." All right, so how we're going to do this is every single time I get to a page break or a subchapter, I'm going to promote the book. I'm doing this in lieu of an audiobook. I have something that I'm working on right now called Readers Come First, giggity. But basically, every writing community I've been a part of has pretty much collapsed or is worthless at this point. I'm talking about the speculative fiction community, the horror community, all that stuff. And I believe the reason why this happened is because we focused on each other instead of the reader. So I am going to be doing all these free live readings of my books, starting with this one, and just to give people something to do, something to read for free. Now, if you want to support the channel, you can. I will say that half of all profits that come in do go to my investor, H. Michael Casper. And that's one of the reasons why there's going to be a membership wall after the first chapter is over. but you're going to get the entirety of the first chapter, which is 25,000 words. It's novella length. And then the memberships will start, and I'll be live streaming to members only after that chapter. But the week after, that Sunday, it will be live on the channel. So if you want to continue listening for free, you can, but I would appreciate the support. Also, if you buy the book, there's links down there in the doobly-doo. If you buy the book, please review the book. I don't care if it's a positive, negative, it does not matter. If it's a meh, I need reviews so I can start advertising the book. Plenty of places out there will not let you, places like Book Club will not let you advertise your book without 50 reviews. And right now I have, I believe, one from Jimmy Brown, and I have one from Josh Boone. And that's all I got right now. I desperately need reviews. So let's see here. Speaking of your books, I was listening to the audible of your book Cruelty. Yeah, Kevin did a really, really good job with that one. I was very impressed with how he did Tuan. Just got my copy from Amazon a few days ago. I'm so excited to get into it, especially after how you hyped it up in the last live. This is a book about everything. If you missed the last live, go back and watch it. But people were trying to stump me. I asked them to try and stump me by bringing up things that they didn't think would be in the book, and no one could stump me. Nobody stumped me. This is a book about everything. By the time you reach the final book, Rubes and Ruin, you will have a little bit of everything. So it doesn't matter what genre you like. This is a book for readers. This is not a book for horror fans, for romance fans, for sci-fi fans. This is a book for everyone, and that was very important to me while I was writing it. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this. First, we have the title card. The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune by S.E. Johnson. And you have the dedication page. It says, for Josh Boone. If Josh hadn't come into my life, I probably wouldn't have written this. He funded me writing the book, basically paid me to get this thing out, and I did it. And then H. Michael Casper swung in, and he took care of all the funding for the book. The cover was all done by Ashley R. Guillory. Guillory. Ashley did a fantastic job with the cover. I'm indebted to her. Amazing job. Down back here, if you don't have the physical copy, it's a grave with thyme sprigs growing out of it, and that's important. John, I gave it a good review. Where'd you leave your review? You're not Jimmy Brown. I know you're not. So far, I've only seen 2 reviews. And one of them's from the editor of the book, who didn't give it a star rating, of course, because that'd be a conflict of interest. Next, we have the table of contents. Hello, Zeely. Once I get started, I'm not going to be reading chat until the subchapter breaks. So keep that in mind. I am not ignoring you. Okay, so we're going to start with the epigraph, the quotes from other books. The author can show himself to be an astronomer, a skilled cosmographer, a musician, knowledgeable about affairs of the state, and perhaps he will even have an opportunity to show himself. And if all of this is done in an agreeable style, and comes as close as possible to the truth, it will most certainly weave a web of beautiful and varied threads. Cervantes, Don Quixote. It's incomprehensible, really, because it assumes a certainty, and being certain of anything goes against our nature. The certainty that someone will never come back, never speak again, never take another step, whether to come closer to or move further off, will never look at us or look away. I don't know how to bear it or how we recover. Javier Marias, The Infatuations. I feel ignored already. Hey, Mike, how you doing? All right, Chapter 1, The Beginning of Time. 1. Everyone used to wave when the carnival came through town. Young and old, men and women and everyone in between. We'd sit in our train cars, watching those we breezed past, their hair blowing, faces alight with the possibilities of our unique performances. There was something special about a traveling show, something about being there and gone, a mercurial existence creating everlasting impact, memories to fill a lifetime, and more. Our carnival was more than that, though, greater than all the rest, because we had the best freak show in the world. We were known for our oddities, our inborn talents, and how we used them to entertain. We were a family not of blood, but close association. Each of us chose the other, we misfits and outcasts, so much closer than true kin for that reason. Each of us chose the other, we misfits and outcasts. Oh, I already read that, sorry. We never loved anyone more than we loved each other. We're a century removed from the birth of the Cortez family carnival, and many of us are dead and gone. But those of us still among the living recall them all with perfect clarity. The love and the passion, the trials and tribulations. Although we've grown apart, for reasons we shall explain in the following manuscript, each one of us lives on in one another's memories. Father Time and Mother Nurture, Cy, Trixie, and Bobble, the Go-Go Gals, Jinx and Carol and Willie, even Panties the Chimp. All of them an indelible, detailed work of art, painted on the mosaic canvas of our souls. We've a long way to travel, but like every lengthy journey, ours begins with a single step. All tales, fact or fiction, begin in media res. A faux start, so to speak, because before the Cortez family carnival, there was a birth. Yet even that birth is not the beginning. Much came before, but those people, places, and things add nothing to the narrative. So we will set out on our journey of 1,000,000 miles with the child who would become Father Time was born in 19 start that over. The child who would become Father Time was born in 1896 to Myrtle Waycott. The bastard who raped Myrtle at the age of 14 was killed by Myrtle's widower father, Henry Waycott Jr. Henry, a struggling farmer and single parent who'd lost his wife to fever 10 years prior, tracked the rapist, one Stephen Desjardins, for 3 days, while Myrtle remained at home under the care of local midwife Cassie Rutledge. Henry found the abhorrent son of a bitch drunk in a rundown East Texas brothel, 110 miles from the scene of the crime, ass deep in a 10-cent whore. He sneaked into the room inside which Desjardins was missionarily pumping his last and shot the man in the back. The whore screamed and rolled from under Desjardins. She scrambled on hands and knees out the door and into the brothel's main hall. As she escaped to find aid, although she'd never needed to fear for her own life, Henry Waycott castrated Desjardins with the buck knife Henry had made with his own 2 hands and lopped off the man's penis, too, for good measure, then shoved testes and all up the rapist's rectum. When the sheriff arrived, he told his deputy that he'd never seen a man stuffed like a turkey and, by God, he never wanted to see it again. Amen. Henry Waycott, being the upright man that he was, had waited for the authorities to arrive, then explained why he'd felt the need to maim and murder Desjardins. And the sheriff, whose wife had been raped and murdered by some lowlife nobody he'd locked away years prior, but not for long enough it seemed, excused Henry from further legal troubles. Judge is my brother-in-law. I'm sure he won't mind. The sheriff told Henry, I wish your baby girl a speedy recovery. If anyone can ever recover from something like that, God bless her. Henry thanked the sheriff and returned home. Myrtle, slight as she was, started showing signs she was with child as soon as 14 weeks. Not even into her second trimester, she looked to have swallowed a cantaloupe whole. Henry, for all his good tendencies, refused to entertain the notion of terminating the pregnancy. When Cassie Rutledge suggested a witchery woman who took care of unwanted burdens, both born and unborn, Henry shook his head of unruly ginger hair and said, "If the Lord wills the baby come into this world, his will be done." For Henry, it seemed ending a life was only acceptable if he was the one doing the killing. Myrtle continued the trend of showing early by having the child 5 weeks premature. The baby was a healthy one, born intersex, and Myrtle and Henry loved him dearly, extra parts and all. God doesn't make mistakes, was Henry's position. Because the male part of the baby's anatomy was, as Henry called it, so comedically large, the babe was presented to all and sundry as a boy. They named the child something he would grow to hate, so we will respect Father Time's wishes and not state the moniker here or anywhere, ever, for that matter. That's not to say that someone smart and observant couldn't puzzle it out for themselves. Father Time's childhood passed as does a lucid dream. He drifted through school as neither popular nor outcast. He simply existed, as so many of us do, never hero or villain, neither exceptional nor dull. Friends came and went, lending credence to Grandpa Henry's oft repeated words. Relationships are like train stations, arrivals and departures. You're going to have some fine conversations and meet some fine folks, but then you or them's going to move on to your respective destinations. It's the nature of people. Father Time finished the education provided by his hometown's one-room schoolhouse and went to work for his Grandpa Henry on the family farm. He fed chickens, milked cows, hayed horses, and plowed fields. He did this until he was 23, and the circus came to town. That's the first subchapter. Well, I'm going to keep going. Those of you just joining us, I am reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by myself under the pen name S.E. Johnson. If you want, you can snag a copy from Amazon down there in the doobly-doo. The links are all down there. You can get a $30 version that is signed that comes directly from me. If you're in the US, in the UK, it's $100. Just because I don't know how much it's going to cost you. And the last time that I sent something, just a single book to a friend in the UK, it cost me $70 just in shipping. So if you're thinking that it's an exorbitant cost, it is. But I will refund anything that I do not use on the shipping, and then I will send you a screenshot of what I paid for the shipping. I'm going to get a jump. I'm going to get a jump. I'm going to get a drink, and then we're going to jump right back into it. All right, here we go. Subchapter 2. The steam engine chugged in the distance, leaving a limp column of grayish smoke in its wake, its whistle just a blowing, drawing the attention of everyone within shouting distance. Myrtle drove the young man her little boy had grown into out to the tracks, racing the train until she finally overtook and pulled ahead of it, dust from the road leaving a smog of debris in the rear view. The panel truck Grandpa Henry had purchased with the last of a government subsidiary grant given to struggling farmers during the Great War, bouncing on rusty springs, thudding along like fingers over a washboard. Myrtle gripped the steering wheel as she had held on to the memory of her stolen virginity these 24 years gone. Well ahead of the approaching train, Myrtle stomped the brake, cut the wheel sharp right, and came to a sliding halt aimed at the railroad crossing. She and her son threw open their respective doors and stood behind them as the train thundered toward the crossing. Father Time, his chin and cheeks already covered in a thick red beard that would soon gray and stay that way for the rest of his life, waved excitedly at the faces in the windows as they blew by, not knowing then that one day he'd be one of those faces. Myrtle and Father Time stayed where they were until the train was nothing but a fading spot on the horizon. Then they drove home, bursting with kinetic excitement, to tell Grandpa Henry what they'd seen. Grandpa stood at the sink, peeling potatoes for a stew, while Myrtle tried to convince him a little fun never hurt anyone. "We don't have the money for no circus, Myrtle girl. You know that." "We could sell a hog," Myrtle said. She gave Father Time a wink she hoped her father wouldn't see. "We need 'em for bacon." "We can spare one hog, Daddy." "I said what I said." And for 2 whole days, that was that. On the final day the circus would be in town, Myrtle came into Father Time's room and handed him $2 silver. "What's this for?" Father Time asked her. "Take the truck. I'll tell Daddy you're picking up feed, and you're gonna have to pick it up before Jewel's place closes. But afterward, you go to that circus, and you have fun, my beautiful boy." Where'd, where'd you, how'd you, what? "I mended some clothes for a girlfriend of mine. You remember Harriet?" Father Time nodded. "Well, Harriet paid me more than the work was worth. She said because I told her you wanted to go to that circus so bad. You can thank her yourself when you get to Jewel's store. She'll be working the counter till closing. Now, go on, get." He shot forward and wrapped his arms around her, crushing her with his embrace. He'd been a whole foot taller than her since his last growth spurt at 17, and hugging her was like cuddling a withered, stuffingless cloth snake. There wasn't much to her at all, and there never had been. When he pulled away, she was grinning with sparkling tears in the corners of her eyes. Father Time would recall that smile on his mother's face long after he replaced her with new souls to love and call family. We're reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. You can buy the book yourself and read it for yourself down there in the doobly-doo. There's an Amazon link, and there's 2 different signed copy links, one for the US and one for the UK, so make sure you click the right one. If you order from the UK using the US link, I will refund you as soon as I get a chance, because the shipping is rather expensive, as you can see after clicking the link. 3. Jewel's store was the biggest building for 50 miles, and had first been erected in 1852, when the township was settled. The titular Jules, surname Martin, had been dead nigh on 2 decades, and his son Douglas and Douglas's wife Vanessa had run the place ever since. Douglas kept inventory, while Vanessa kept the books and ran the register when the help had days off. They had 2 employees, Harriet Goodman and Kyle O'Leary, cashier and stock boy, respectively. Today, as Myrtle had predicted, Harriet was working the register. "Hi there!" Harriet waved along with the greeting. Harriet was a small woman, 5'1" and 100 pounds, soaking wet with a badger strapped to her back, but she was still a bigger lady than his mother ever would be. Harriet preferred gingham dresses and kept her hair up behind her head with ribbons whose colors changed daily. Today's ribbon shone a silky paisley blue to match her blue dress. "Hi," Father Time said meekly and approached the counter. "Mama told me to come by and speak with you." "Oh?" Harriet's grin was full of mischief. It made her prettier than she already was. At least Father Time thought so. She sat the papers she'd been rifling through. She sat down the papers she'd been rifling through and gave Father Time her undivided attention. "What did we supposedly need to speak about?" "I'm supposed to pick up our feed and the young man trailed off, stuffing his hands in his pockets, rocking on his heels. "And?" Harriet prodded gently. And I need to thank you. He dug through the pocket of his raggedy, work-worn, dirt-stained jeans and removed the $2 silver his mother had given him. For these. Oh, honey, that weren't nothing. Just glad I could help. Is your mama feeling better? She's fine, far as I know. Harriet's face twisted into an odd expression of puzzlement Father Time couldn't find all the pieces to. What? He asked. Nothing really, I don't suppose. Just glad she's feeling better. Can I get you anything else besides the feed? No, ma'am. Just the feed, please and thank you. Be right back. Harriet disappeared through the doorless doorway behind the register. A moment later, Father Time heard her call out, Kyle, where are you? Here I am. What you want? Came Kyle's muffled reply. Myrtle's son is here for that feed she ordered last week. It's round back, next to the Morton's bags. Help him load 'em up, please and thank you. I'm eating, cried Kyle. You're going to be eating my boot for dessert. You don't help that boy. You don't ever, you don't, you don't ever wear no dag blasted boots, woman. Father Time couldn't help but chuckle at their back and forth. Harriet returned to the counter, shaking her head at Kyle's audacity. Roll that truck of yours round back, and Kyle will help you load up that feed. Yes, ma'am. Father Time turned to leave. And you have fun tonight, you hear? I plan to. Thanks again. He called over his shoulder on the way out. Anything for your mama, son. Bye now. Father Time pulled the panel truck up beside the stacked bags of grain and got out. Kyle, a burly, bearded brute of a man with arms as big around as Father Time's thighs, already had 3 bags of feed draped over his bulging forearm. Just on the back there, Father Time instructed. I know where they go, boy. You think I'm dense? Denser than a bucket of cement and half as bright, yes, sir, said Father Time with a wicked grin. You gonna watch that mouth of yours? Kyle laughed. He was only messing. Man talk was what Mama called this kind of thing. Father Time grabbed a feed sack and tossed it over his shoulder. He could only carry one of the 50-pound bags at a time and was embarrassed to admit such, although he'd never let on as much to Kyle. Even with all the heavy lifting he did around the family farm, his arms were nothing to brag about. He could haul hay bales and pile sandbags during monsoon season, but struggled with anything over 70 pounds. Not weak, just nowhere near as strong as Kyle. The 2 men worked until all 14 bags were loaded. When they were done, Kyle crushed Father Time's hand and thanked him for the help. Father Time cringed inwardly, refusing to let on how much Kyle's handshake had hurt. I should be thanking you, said Father Time. It's my job's all. Say, son, how's your mama? Kyle shook a smoke from a soft pack and lit it with a wooden match he'd struck on his zipper. Father Time shrugged. Fine. Why's everyone keep asking how Mama doing? There was that look again, this time on Kyle's face instead of Harriet's, and the message was no clearer on Kyle's face than it had been on Harriet's. Kyle exhaled thick bluish-gray smoke, spat a wad of brown and green phlegm into the dirt, and said, I don't know, boy. Harriet said Myrtle looked a bit peaked. Haggard's the word she used. Something about a headache, too. Probably just tired. Farm work ain't for women. This was something Father Time heard a lot from men and women alike, if they were in the know about how much Myrtle Waycott helped around the farm. They'd be even more shocked to find out that Grandpa Henry did all the cooking. All 3 of them did their fair share, but Myrtle preferred hard labor, and Grandpa Henry enjoyed cooking, said it relaxed him. And Father Time saw nothing wrong with doing what you loved, so long as the chores got done. Thanks again for the help, Father Time said, and climbed into the truck's cab. Kyle wrapped a grizzled hand over the sill of the open driver's side window. You take care of your mama, son, even if it means doing double the work around the homestead. You only ever have the one. Keep her safe, Boyle." "Yes, sir." "And quit that yes, sir crap. I ain't your daddy." "What's a daddy?" Father Time said with a sly grin. Kyle chuckled. "You quit playing and go on. What's a daddy? You darn fool." All right, for those of you just joining us, I'm reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by me, under a new pen name, S.E. Johnson. You can buy the book from Amazon down below, or you can click one of the links to get a signed copy. All that's down there. Hey, Tony, how you doing? Happy New Year's, man. I will be stopping every subchapter to plug the book, tell you where to get it, so on and so forth. And we're gonna just move right along. Hey, Kaiju, how you doing? I got my copy last week. I think I'll get to it next month. I hope. I hope you enjoy it. I need reviews really, really badly, very badly. The only way I can do the ad sites like BookBub and several other ones is I have to have 50 reviews, and I got 2 across Goodreads and Amazon right now. Don't forget to like the stream. Don't forget to share the stream. All that stuff. You know I hate this part of it, but I got to do it because I have an investor this time, so I got to make money out of this. Anyways, jumping right back into it. 4. Circuses and carnivals were different breeds of the same species, like how mountain lions and domesticated cats are kin to one another. Somewhere down the line, circuses had a single big top tent, wherein all forms of attractions were cycled in and out. Elephants and tigers, clowns and tightrope walkers, all hosted by a single showman referred to as a ringmaster. Carnivals were separate parts of a greater whole, concessions and game booths, tent shows and rides, each piece of the puzzle operated by their respective owners. Circuses were hierarchies, carnivals a democracy. The ticket booth operator, a beer-bellied man in a white dress shirt, black suspenders like parentheses around his bulging gut, and red bow tie, took Father Time's silver dollar and returned to him 80 cents. Feeling rich beyond the pale, Father Time stuffed the coins into the pocket that still held a full silver dollar and pushed through the turnstile into a world so magically foreign his breath caught in his chest. He stood stock still, less than a foot from the turnstile, mouth agape and eyes wide, until a voice behind him barked, "You gonna move, son?" Sorry, my apologies," Father Time muttered and got moving. He followed the trail of circus goers toward the big top, gawking at the electric lights strung in dipping arches that followed the edge of the tent's roof. The tent itself was the colors of the barbershop pole out front of Jules' General Store, crisp red and white, immaculately kept, not a wrinkle or tear in sight. The whole thing backdropped by a clear night sky full to bursting with twinkling stars. A black canvas poked through with holes to reveal a brighter world. Sorry. A black canvas poked through with holes to reveal a brighter landscape beyond his own. The scents of straw and wild animals emanated from the peeled flaps of the tent, the aroma familiar yet alien. He'd worked around livestock his entire life, but this scent was somehow different and the same all at once. Animal musk mixed with body odor undercut by the buttery notes of freshly popped corn. The juxtaposition struck him, a kind of cognitive dissonance that related the unrelatable. Sounds issued forth from the drawn flaps, excited voices and childlike screeches, underlined by hissing murmurs akin to the susurration of incoming tide. An electric feeling of wanton anticipation sizzled on the air, spitting and crackling, beckoning him in, in, in. The only comparison he could draw was auctions he'd attended with Grandpa Henry, who was always on the hunt for cheap, secondhand farm equipment. He followed the throng into the tent. It was much hotter inside than it had been outside. Bodies pressed together, far more than the rounded bleachers could handle, the audience overflow piling into the standing room only section that circled the main area like a fleshy wreath. He looked from top to bottom, bottom to top, taking in the two grand posts like power poles, the tight rope stretched taut between them at what seemed a mile above the ground. Through spaces made by the bobbing heads of those ahead of him, he saw a pedestal in the center of the ring that reminded him of the stool he sat on to milk the cows, only far bigger, easily 3 times the size, which had been painted in the same alternating red and white as the big top, as that barber pole out front of Jules. Fresh hay, golden and stiff, covered the interior floor of the performance circle, and Father Time could imagine clearly, almost preternaturally, how the straw would snap and crunch under his feet, should he venture beyond the velvet ropes that separated the audience from the performers. Of course, at that time, he had no idea what to expect. All of it was so overwhelmingly new and foreign to him that he couldn't have predicted what he was about to see had a madman held a gun to his head. Instead of forcing prescience he was incapable of, Father Time snaked along the heels of those before him until he reached a break in the standing room section where 3 young girls had their hands white knuckle tight on the velvet ropes. Each girl was a different height, but he stood at least a foot taller than any of them, so he drew up behind them, leaving a respectful distance between his front and their backs, thinking he'd scored the next best thing to front row seats. The woman Father Time would come to love all his years stepped up beside him. He did not acknowledge her presence. Not then, but soon, soon. The show began, and it was love at first sight. The ringmaster rode a massive elephant, the likes of which Father Time had only seen drawn with cartoonish details in picture books. The real thing was awe-inspiring, and the young man could only stare at the shuffling beast as if he were the first man to see the face of God in heaven. The ringmaster was dressed in all red, aside from black boots and a white shirt under his crimson cloak and tails. His glimmering red top His glimmering red top hat rested on a mass of jet black hair, shadowing his eyes, lending the man an evil, almost demonic countenance. The ringmaster's elephant steed stepped onto the red and white pedestal in the center of the ring, raised its trunk, and blew confetti out into the audience with a tremendous blast of air, which Father Time thought surely had to have been a sneeze on par with a backfiring truck. Vibrant shards of red, green, blue, and yellow paper rained over the throng, who oohed and awed at the spectacle. Even Father Time was held rapt by the seemingly impossible feat. How'd he do that? He's magic, said the woman to his right, as if she'd read his mind. When Father Time glanced in the direction of the voice, he fell in love with a second time in under 2 minutes. The woman had hair down to her waist, plaited and thick, a shimmering black that looked purple in the glow of the lights overhead. Her soft brown features were curious, foreign to him, for Father Time, in his limited small-town view of the world, had only met white people like himself, and while he hadn't been introduced to any colored people, he'd seen a few of them. But this woman, by God, she was so different. Not white like him, but not a Negro either. Her deeply tanned skin shone like stained cherry wood, and she'd spoken in an accent he hadn't heard before. He stared for longer than was polite until she noticed and swiveled her head in his direction. He abruptly snapped back to the show. She leaned in, offered her hand, and tenderly spoke her name. Her breath, warm and thick in his ear, made the hair on his arms and the nape of his neck stand on end. He slipped his hand into hers and shivered with pleasure. Your hands are so rough. What a funny thing to say, thought Father Time. Tell me, what is your name? he told her. Her smile melted into a frown. Not a very good name. Who named you? Jew? I'm not. I'm a. Father Time. Someone behind them shouted for them to hush up down front, and Father Time immediately acquiesced to their demands by diverting his attention back to the show. You no listen to them. You talk as much as you want. Why do you keep saying that? He asked out of the side of his mouth. Saying what? Jew. I'm not Jewish. I ain't never met no Jew. She laughed musically. Not Jew, silly man. You. I am saying you. From that point on, Father Time's mind translated every J she uttered to a Y, and there was no more confusion. He turned his head to her again. Where are you from? Honduras? Did you know it? He shook his head. Watch the show. We will talk afterward. I'd like that, he said with a smile. She giggled. I bet you would. Now, eyes forward, gringo. Who? Just watch the show, she said, still giggling. Right. Okay, yeah. Interest in the show flagging, Father Time could only think of the strange woman by his side. She overshadowed every performance, from tightrope walking to clown cars emptying, and while the circus was worth every penny of his 20 cents paid, she was worth the rest of his life. I'm reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. It's a 552-page book I'm going to be reading for free here on the channel. If you would like to buy the book so you don't have to wait for me to read this over multiple lives, links are down there in the doobly-doo. You can buy signed copies. You can buy regular copies off of Amazon. If you do more than a $5 super chat, you get the Kindle book for free. So, yeah. Take a drink, and we will get right back to it. The only issue here is every chapter break, subchapter break, I'm going to be plugging the book, so it's not going to be a seamless audiobook, experience. But I'm doing this for you guys because even if you can't afford the book, I want you to still be able to enjoy the book. Kaiju said, I'm good. Just got a copy of your book through your link in the video here. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kaiju. I appreciate you. 5. When the show ended, the pair walked outside, through the rear exit, and rounded the grounds to where Father Time had parked his truck. The stars were gone, covered by thick, cottony clouds, but the moon was almost full, backlighting the clouds to the west like a flashlight under a thin sheet, giving them an otherworldly glow. Father Time loved this time of year, before the monsoons hit and turned everything to muck and mire. The rain helped the crops, too, so long as the irrigation Grandpa Henry had installed worked, and it rarely ever failed. 3 years prior, on Father Time's 20th birthday, they'd lost everything to a flash flood. The rain had poured down in sheets, a seemingly solid mass of water, and the deluge stole every seed they'd planted and washed them all to destinations unknown. Grandpa Henry, having the gallows humor for which he was so popular, said, Someone in Timbuktu gonna have one hell of a harvest season, by gum. This, you, this your truck? Said Father Time's new acquaintance. He loved the musical nature of her voice, how every word sounded like a hymn. A tornado swirled ravenously in his stomach, as if he hadn't eaten in days. Such an odd but somehow pleasing sensation that was nothing like hunger, if he was honest with himself. Father Time, for reasons unknown to him, because he'd never been anything but honest with people, contemplated lying, saying the truck was his, but settled instead on shaking his head. It's my grandpa's. Can I drive you somewhere? Where would we go? She asked. I could take you home. She laughed. I am home. Father Time glanced around, saw the milling crowd shuffling toward their respective vehicles, and others who'd started off down the road on foot before looking back to her. You live here? I'm with the show, yes. Really? He asked incredulously. Yes, silly man. Do I look like I'm from around here? She playfully shoved his shoulder. The ringmaster is my uncle. But you're not part of the show? No, no interest. I feed everyone, clean the train cars, and take care of minor injuries. Oh, okay. Do your parents work here too? My parents died long ago. The cough took them. Father Time knew about consumption. Grandpa Henry's good friend, Hap, whose real name was Harold Patterson, had died of the lung condition. Grandpa Henry had lingered at Hap's bedside for weeks, somehow not catching the sickness from his friend, and said later that it was surely the most horrible way to die. He went out gasping like a fish out of water. God bless him. How long ago did they pass? Asked Father Time. Oh, she thought for a moment. About 6 years ago. We were in Huntsville. You been there? Ain't heard of a Huntsville. Is it in Texas? No, it's northern Alabama, I think. Maybe Tennessee? So many places they all blur. Makes me dizzy. How long you been with the circus? He asked, not knowing what else to say. All he knew for certain was that he didn't want to go home. Not ever again. Not so long as this wonderful stranger was available to talk to. It wasn't solely her beauty, either. He liked everything about her. The way her hips swayed when she walked, the pride in her voice when she spoke of her circus, the light in her eyes, so preternaturally bright, as if there were spotlights behind each one. My whole life, she said, and there was that pride again. She was positively bursting with it. My uncle Jaime is third generation circus folk. Jaime? I think he's called Jamie in English. Oh, okay. His face crinkled. Wait, so in your language, Y is said like J and J is like H? Her brow crinkled, yet she was somehow still stunning with her face all smushed up. Huh? For a moment, they both stared at each other in confusion. Then they both started laughing. I think I confused myself as much as I did you, said Father Time. Her laughter tinkled like toasted champagne flutes. Yes, I think you did. You're very pretty. It was out of his mouth before he could reel it in. His face flushed as if someone had a torch to his cheeks. What was wrong with him? He'd been around loads of attractive people in his life, both men and women, but he'd never felt like this. Nothing less than enchanted. Thank you. Her eyes glistened in the lesser dark surrounding the well-lit circus grounds, which were, if he wasn't mistaken, the old Carter property. The Carters died in a house fire back in 1910, and nothing had ever been done with the land. If his bearings were right, the big top had been erected on top of the spot where the Carters' house had once stood. He smelled old smoke and charred wood, which was ridiculous, because the house fire had been over a decade prior. This would happen often throughout his life, yet he'd never find an explanation. That, too, would trend for the rest of his existence. So many stories with little or no conclusion would haunt him more than any specter ever could. She reached out and trailed a finger down his forearm, then took his rough hand in her soft palm. She'll have a girlfriend, Gringo? Father Time swallowed hard and shook his head. She'll want one? Something wonderful and scary blazed in her gaze. His stomach warmed. His crotch throbbed. I I never You never what? I I know how babies are made. She laughed, and he reflexively snatched his hand away. No, no, I'm sorry, she said. I don't mean to laugh. You're just so. What is it about you? Innocent? I think that's it. You're Innocent. I like innocent. I should go, he said, although there was no place he'd rather have been than right there with her. Maybe you should stay. Mama and Grandpa Henry are waiting for me. This was this was fun, but I don't want to raise Grandpa's hackles. He don't know I'm here. Mama lied and said I was getting feed, and that's what's in the back of the truck there. And 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 you're making a whole lot of excuses, you silly man. Come here. And suddenly she was kissing him. He'd never kissed anyone but his mama, but that had been nothing like this. Her tongue caressed his lips, begging entrance, and he opened them for her. Her hand slipped into the hair on his nape, and he shuddered, almost violently, under her touch. What was this beautiful thing that was happening to him? She pulled away, and his heart plummeted into his guts. He thought for a brief moment that he'd done something wrong. Why else would she stop so abruptly? Damn his inexperience. He was probably a horrible kisser. Terrible. He'd ruined his one shot at love, or whatever this tumultuous feeling was, cycloning in his stomach and up through his chest into his throat. He felt like he could scream and laugh and vomit all at once. What's wrong? She asked, wiping herself from his lips with the pad of her thumb. Nothing. Did I do something wrong? No, silly. You kiss beautifully. But nothing good lasts forever. It has to end to make way for new good things. You're so pretty, he said breathlessly. You said that already. Her hand drifted to the side of his face, petted his cheek. Something was going on between his legs, something stiff and wet and warm. For a second, he thought he'd peed his pants, but the fluid was thicker than urine. Now, it should be said that those who are born intersex can mature earlier or later in life, while some never mature sexually at all. There really are no rules when it comes to nature and its chaotic course, and we must remember that one's own experiences are not the experiences of everyone. Come with me, she said, and led him to the cab door. She pulled it open and climbed in and over the driver's seat. Father Time, drawn by an invisible leash, pulled himself into the cab after her. By the time he settled into the seat and looked over at her, she had her shirt off. Her full breasts hung big as the sandbags he'd hefted back on the farm, the left one thicker than the other. Goose flesh rose across her chest, her nipples like spikes, and he could think of nothing more he'd like to do than kiss them, to take them into his mouth like a nursing babe. He could only stare in awed silence as she arched her back, lifted her rump, and thumbed down pants and panties to her knees before kicking them off completely. When she was completely naked, she twisted in the seat and took his wrist. She pushed his anxious fingers into the wet heat between her legs and mashed them into her. She shuddered under his touch. A smell like unwashed laundry filled the cab, but Father Time did not think it unpleasant. Truth be told, he didn't think at all. When she released his hand, his fingers kept working. She took his unoccupied hand and made it cup one of her breasts, smashing his palm into the pliant, wonderfully soft flesh. He thumbed her nipple, brown and as big as a baseball, until she moaned, and he mistook her pleasure for pain. Are you okay? He asked. I am fine. She shoved him gently back and hiked up one leg, resting the heel on the back of the bench seat. Now, put your mouth on me. Lick me like I'm an ice cream. Father Time did as he was told. The taste of her was everything else. The taste of her was as everything else had been this night, a completely new yet pleasurable experience. Taking her advice, he worked his tongue up through her folds to the nub at the top. Put your fingers in. She gasped as he acquiesced to her tender, breathless commands. Move them, like you're telling me to come here. Put more pressure. Yes, like that, faster. Father Time worked faster. Right there, gringo. Right. Oh, Dios mío. Right there. He worked the nub with the tip of his tongue, as one might worry a loose tooth, rotating, flicking, faster, slower, alternating whenever her moaning seemed to lessen. He coveted her pleasure, this ecstasy that sounded like groans of pain, and chased it to the end of the earth. His middle finger ground into the spongy, textured flesh inside her until she shuddered and poured forth down his chin, drenching his beard. Fuck! She roared, bucking her hips so severely that his head butted her pubis. Seizing, she clamped his head between her legs so that he could hear his own blood rushing in his ears, the ocean in a conch shell. By the end, his pants and the seat beneath him were soaked, as was the case where she sat. Their collected musk filled the cab, and the windows had, thankfully, considering they were still right outside the circus grounds, become foggier than London in November. Quick as a viper, she was on him, pushing him back against the driver's side door, hands fighting at his belt, tugging off his pants, groping and lifting his penis, finding the cleft beneath, and then everything came to a screeching halt. Oh, she said, her eyes wide and curious, while a wide grin spread below them. She squeezed his manhood, stroked his womanhood with an inquisitive finger. He stiffened and opened for her. Oh, she repeated, this is new. Why didn't you say you were special? Special? He huffed. So special, she said, and then her mouth was on him, all over him, both of him, and his release was the stuff of legends. Once more, we are reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. I am stopping at every subchapter, every chapter break, page break, to push the book. Links down there in the doobly-doo. You can get one from Amazon, or you can buy a signed copy from me directly. There are both US and UK links. If you are outside the UK but not in the US, you can use those, and we'll work out the details when I ship your product. I'm good. Yeah, you already read that. All right, jumping right back into it. 6. Afterward, she lay between his legs, her back pressed against his chest, her hands petting his nearly hairless thighs and shins in the afterglow of their coupling. He kissed the back of her head. Her hair smelled of lavender and cream, with a low, skunky odor underlying it all. He breathed her in, filling his soul with her essence. What are you thinking? She asked in a low whisper. Don't reckon I'm capable of thinking at present. She giggled, and her body, slick with sweat, thrummed against him. Well, what do you think of what we did? She asked, her voice more serious now. It was beautiful. Good. I feel the same. This was your first time? Yes, he said shyly. Not bad, Gringo. Not bad. He laughed softly. I had no idea what I was doing. But you follow instructions good. That's the most important thing. If your lover doesn't tell you, you should ask. A thin silence, light as cotton, settled on them. Father Time hadn't shared such a pleasing quietude with another human being in all his days. Silences back on the farm tended to be born of anger or disappointment. If Grandpa Henry or Mama weren't talking, something was wrong, and he always kept his distance. Not that they would become violent, no, never that. His guardians were kind-hearted and forgiving, But Father Time knew to allow them their space, out of respect, if nothing else. He too preferred his own company when he was distraught. After a time that passed like syrup down a sapling, Father Time said, "Why did you call me special?" She leaned to the side, craned her neck so she could look at him. "You don't know why? Really? Is there is there something wrong with me?" "Oh, lovely, no. Nothing wrong. Just different. Different is good. Like I said, you are special." But what's special about me?" "Well, you saw me up close, right?" She punctuated her statement with a titter. "Yeah?" He swallowed, unsure and terrified of what she might say next. "You saw I don't have exactly what you have, no?" The way she said it, he wasn't sure how to respond. Yes or no. He thought a moment, then decided on, "That's all. Boys have penises, girls don't." She quieted. The only sounds in the cab of the truck were her breathing and his thudding heart. He feared he'd pass out if she didn't say something soon. Instead of speaking, she twisted and drew her knees under her. She placed a palm to each of his cheeks, leaned in, and kissed him sweetly on the forehead. When she drew back, she said, "You should not be ashamed about what I am going to say. You promise me you won't be." I How can I know how I'll respond when I don't know what you're going to say?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's good. You're very smart. You can't know, so I will just say it." He laughed nervously. "Please hurry up." "You are lovely and special. I've never met anyone like you, and you should know that I desire all of you, every part of you. Had I not, tonight would not have happened. You should never think that tonight was about sympathy. You wanted me, and I wanted you. What we did was magic. You need to believe that above all else. Did you believe me?" He nodded, still scared, but no longer terrified he'd faint dead away. "Men, they don't have what I have. Not at all. Did you understand?" He thought about her words, but couldn't reckon what they could mean. He shook his head. "Tu madre should have told you all this. Oh well. Here is what makes you different. I have a pussy. Men have a dick. Like you do. But most other men have balls. They hang behind your thing, your dick. You are both man and woman. It's beautiful, really. So now you see, you are special." I I don't understand. Balls? See, two of them. They are in a sack. It's where the sperm comes from your balls. You I don't think you have sperm. Nothing came out your dick when you came. Only reason I know you came was because you leaked from the part that's like mine. You come like a woman. So Grandpa Henry has balls behind his. He swallowed thickly. "Behind his penis?" See. She nodded. "But you are wonderful and unique. You are beautiful just the way you are." "Why?" Father Time fought tears he could not rationalize. Why did he feel so sad? Like he'd been betrayed? Why didn't no one tell me? "Oh, honey, I don't know. I can't speak for anyone but myself. That is for them to tell you." The tears came then, and she held him through it all. He felt foolish and naive, and worst of all, dumb. Why hadn't Grandpa or Mama told him? Why had they allowed him to go through life ignorant of his differences? Were they ashamed of him? They must have been. As if reading his mind, she said, "They were protecting you." She nodded, as if she herself had just come to this conclusion. Yes, I think so. I don't know them, but whoever raised you must be kind. No one turns out like you if they don't have love at home. Don't be angry with them, please. Do not hold all that is inside you right now against them. Life is too short to be angry at those you love. She lifted his chin with her forefinger. Believe me, my beauty. I know. I I have to go. You should, yes, she said, her smile finally reaching her eyes. While she got dressed, Father Time's mind ran laps inside his head, chasing answers to questions he'd never known he should ask. He pulled his pants on, which was quite the feat inside the cab, but he managed. As he buckled his belt, she leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. Remember me, gringo, and I will remember you. Without waiting for a response, she opened her door and slipped out into the night. He wanted to cry out, to call out, beg her to take him with her, but he couldn't speak. Something had lodged in his throat, something as big as a fist. So he simply sat there, tears streaming down his cheeks, sure that he would never see this woman, this miracle of light and love, ever again. He removed his shirt and used it to wipe the steam from the windows. Then he drove home, his heart crackling with fresh loss, his mind a storm of unanswered questions. All right, it's now a subchapter break. We are reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. I am going to take a 10-minute break, and when we get back, we will continue on. I hope you guys are enjoying the book. Let's see here. If you want to buy it, links are down there in the doobly-doo, the description of the video. You can get one from Amazon. You can get a signed copy from me, whether you're in the U.S. or internationally. If you're outside of the U.S., please use the UK link. All right? I'm going to take 10. If there's anybody here and people come popping up going, what's this? Just let them know that I will be back very shortly. Okay, I'm back. Pick up where we left off. I believe the last chapter was subchapter 6. Yeah. So if you're reading along as I'm reading, we are on chapter 1, subchapter 7. Just ordered a copy. Hell yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lazy. Let's see here. All right, I got your order, Lazy. How are you gonna do signed copies? You'll have to practice. I have all that. Anytime I come up with a new pen name, that's the very first thing I practice is the new signature. So don't worry about that. It's gonna look good. I promise. All right. If you're just now joining us, I am reading The Last Freak Show live, book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. You can pick up the book from Amazon or a signed copy from me directly down there in doobly-doo. It's going to take about 2 weeks for the book to get to you. If you buy it from me. Amazon's about a week. All right. 7. The tires crunched over the gravel drive. The gravel drive? Did I say? Okay. Start over. If you guys hear that, that's an audiobook narration technique I learned to let me know when I'm going back and doing them again that I need to edit that. All right, 7. The tires crunched over the gravel drive. Grandpa Henry sat in his rocker on the porch, a beer bottle clutched in one gnarled fist. But Father Time kept going around the house, swinging around so he could back the rig up to the barn doors. He jumped down from the truck and glanced toward the house, expecting to see Grandpa Henry coming to help him unload, but no one came. Mama's bedroom light was on, and he could see her shadow moving about the room, could hear the big band music even through the glass, with 50 yards between him and his mother's window. He worked for half an hour, taking his time, going back and forth unloading and stacking feed sacks before he was finished. Done, his back and legs were no good. His activities earlier in the night hadn't helped, and his stomach growled angry requests for nourishment. He dusted off his hands and headed for the house. Grandpa Henry was still on the porch, but there were 4 empty beer bottles on the wicker table sat beside his rocker, and a half-finished one in his bare paw of a hand. The old man didn't look drunk nor angry, only tired, and he managed a small, wan smile at the sight of his grandson. "Your mama told me where you were. You have fun?" asked Grandpa Henry. "Yes, sir." "Fun places, them traveling shows. Been to one or two back in my youth. Glad you enjoyed yourself. That's why I didn't help you unload. Figured it wouldn't hurt for you to work off them $2. You agree?" "Yes, sir." Father Time warred with confronting his grandfather right then and there. He wanted to shout and holler questions and accusations, but Grandpa Henry's kindness, after being not necessarily lied to, but kept from the truth of the matter, calmed the young man some. They'd talk about it when the subject was naturally ready for discussion, not now, when the wounds were fresh. "Have a seat." Grandpa Henry threw back the last of his beer, belched, and stood, as Father Time took his seat in the available rocker beside his grandfather's. "You want a beer?" "No, sir." "Well, I think you need one or two. Stay there." Grandpa Henry tugged open the screen door on silent, well-oiled hinges, the aromas of cooking meat emanating from inside. The roast his grandfather had been talking about cooking for the past week, no doubt. Grandpa Henry vanished inside, noting in a low voice how damn good dinner smelled. A few minutes later, his grandfather returned with a fresh six-pack of warm beer in brown glass bottles. I cooled the first 6 in the cellar, but you can see I drank those. Warm beer might taste something horrible, but it gets the job done. He handed Father Time a room temperature bottle. Get that in you. Father Time, quiet, popped the cap with the opener Grandpa Henry had installed on the edge of the table between the rockers, and tilted a sip into his mouth. Bitter hops flooded across his tongue, and his face crinkled in disgust. But the look on Grandpa Henry's face showed no patience for his grandson's taste buds. The second gulp was better than the first, albeit not by much. Grandpa sat down, opened his own beer, and drank the whole thing in a single glug. He burped into his fist and sat the dead soldier with its fallen comrades. When had Grandpa Henry gotten so old? His face seemed to hold more lines than it had just earlier in the day. The old man's rheumy eyes seemed haunted. The kindness over his daughter's betrayal, the beer, none of it sat well with Father Time. A heavy sense of foreboding coursed through the young man's veins. There was something wrong, and he was, as usual, in the dark about whatever troubled his grandfather. Is something wrong, Grandpa? Father Time managed. No, son. Just having a beer with my grandson. Is that all right? Yes, sir. Grandpa Henry opened another beer and drank this new one in the same fashion as the last. Father Time steeled himself, put his own bottle to his lips, and opened his throat. He poured the beer into himself. He could still taste her on his tongue, despite the beer, and smell her on his beard. He glanced at he glanced at Grandpa Henry. The old man smiled knowingly, said, You remember I told you I killed the man who hurt your mama? The non sequitur shocked Father Time into further silence. All he could do was nod. You know I'd do anything for you, right? You and your mama? Yes, sir. Good, good. Grandpa Henry stared out over the front of his property. Father Time followed his grandfather's gaze but saw nothing of importance. He looked back to Grandpa, noticed that the old man was crying, strings of tears coursing through the wrinkled canvas of his aged cheeks, where they disappeared into his pile of beard, like streams cutting through a thick wood. I don't want nothing but the best for you two. But sometimes it strikes me that I won't always be here to protect you. Today was one of them days, boy. It's like I got the whole goddamn world resting on my shoulders, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I love the both of you. So I gotta be honest and say it hurt when your mama and you disobeyed me, but that there's my problem. I can't expect you to want to stay cooped up in this old house on these 20 acres if you don't want to. I guess what I'm saying is, do you want to? Father Time had no idea where this was going, nor did he know how to respond. All he could think to say was, Are are you sure there ain't something wrong, Grandpa? His grandfather laughed through his tears. He snorted and blew a wad of gray phlegm into the bushes on the side of the porch railing. A good 6 feet if it was an inch. I don't reckon anything's wrong. I should have seen it coming, you growing like a weed. Grandpa Henry sighed. You know I can smell her on you. Alls I want to know is, did you go to that circus like you said? Don't lie to me, boy. Father Time's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Yes, sir. I met her there. Did you pay for it? No, sir. That's good. You should have saved that for marriage, but I'd be a liar if I said I did. I paid for my first one. Well, your great grandpappy did, anyway. She smelled awful, like a wild animal. A negress she were. Most beautiful woman I ever did see. but good goddamn was she foul smelling. Grandpa Henry chuckled as he wiped snot from his mustache. I reckon she told you, that lady you were with. That's not something you keep to yourself, so I guess she must have. Tell me what. But Father Time knew. He found this funny enough to laugh at because he'd been sure the topic wasn't going to come up this evening. Yes, sir. She told me. Good, good. You know why neither me nor your mama said nothing? The question did come to my mind. I'm sure it did. Grandpa Henry barked laughter. His guffaws devolved into coughing. Father Time got up to pat his grandfather on the back, but Grandpa Henry waved him off. When he settled, he continued, saying, I'm glad she told you, and I'm even gladder that she didn't mind. Don't reckon she did, because you didn't come up them porch stairs screaming hell in my face. That's what I would have done, you know. I would have cussed me up one side and down the other. Pitched a bitch and a half, I would, I swear for God and country. When you was born, you was everything I wanted. Didn't make no never mind to me that you had half one and half the other. You could use the bathroom just fine, and that's all I cared about. Didn't need no invalid on the farm pissing his pants all the dadgum time. But you was healthy, and God, well, he don't make mistakes. We called you a boy, and a boy you was. Nothing ever come of it, but I spent all your God-blessed life waiting for you to come home from school saying how you had different parts than everyone else. Never did happen, but you know that. I just want you to know that we didn't tell you because we were ashamed. We didn't tell you because we wanted you to feel normal. If that makes a lick of sense. Grandpa Henry chuckled softly as he opened another beer on the rim of the table, then sat back again. You ain't no freak of nature, boy. You don't let anyone ever tell you that. You are my goddamn grandson, the light of my life, the best thing that ever happened to your mama and me. And if anyone ever tells you different, well, you tell me and I'll knock their molars into their guts. Father Time could hear the slur in his grandfather's words now. Plus, he was cussing up a storm. Goddamn this and goddamn that. Something Father Time only ever heard his grandfather do when the old man was red with rage. Come to think of it, Father Time couldn't remember ever seeing Grandpa tipsy, much less drunk enough to slur his speech. How many beers had the old man had? We love you, boy. I love you like you was my own son, by God. And long after I'm gone, I'm gonna be with you. Here. Grandpa Henry thumped a forefinger into the center of his chest. This world is a bad place sometimes. But you listen at this here advice, and you listen well. Do no harm, but take no shit. You hear me? Yes, sir. Good. Now go wash that woman off you before your mama catches a whiff. Yes, sir. Father Time stood and walked to the door. As he pulled it open, Grandpa Henry said, I'm sorry we didn't tell you. That wasn't right. But now I suppose we're even. Both of us know what we thought we needed kept from the other. That sound fair to you? Instead of answering, Father Time bent down and hugged his grandfather about the neck. Grandpa buried his face into Father Time's shoulder, and for a time held the old man while he wept. Life is full of beautiful stories, but the loveliest ones of all have happy endings. Looking back on a century of experiences is like piecing together a puzzle you don't have the box for. Little memories grow into grand remembrances, and important episodes dwindle down to the size of a dust mote. But this night, when Grandpa Henry cried into his grandson's collar, remains fresh as new fallen snow, and the world, as a whole, is a better place because this story exists. We are reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you'd like to grab the book yourself, links are down there in the doobly-doo. Open up the description. There is a link to get it at Amazon and links to get signed copies from me. The UK one, if you're outside of the US, you can use the UK link for anywhere in the world. The shipping is expensive. It's $70, but however much it costs, I will refund you whatever I don't use from that. Okay. I haven't figured out how to set the link to only charge you shipping based on where you're at. So that's what we're dealing with right now. I will eventually get those things worked out, hopefully. This is 552 pages, and we are this far in. We are at page 34. Every hour, I'm going to be taking a break. I already took one, so it'll be 2:10, 2:15 before I take another one. And carrying on. 8. Months passed, and the new year rolled in. January came on hard and cold, and a light dusting of snow covered the harvested land. Early freezing in October caused massive loss for the family farm, but such was the life of a farmer. You were always at the mercy of Mother Nature, and she didn't give a plug nickel about necessities like food and money to get through the winter. News concerning the prohibition of alcohol ran through every conversation. Drinking wasn't illegal, but no one could buy, sell, or transport liquor. Grandpa Henry started brewing his own beer as a result, boiling bottles he'd salvaged from the burn pile in order to store the homemade libations. The cellar shelves were now loaded with slender brown bottles more so than mason jars full of pickled vegetables, and stores of wheat and flour were replaced with hops, although the amount of yeast they had on hand year-round remained the same. Mama's sewing work dried up like the county. No one had the money to pay her to stitch up busted seams, so even that supplemental income vanished. She used her last bolts of cloth to fashion winter apparel for her father and son, and wasted the last of her yarn darning cold caps, and the final bit of her thread crocheting doilies no one had the means to purchase. Everyone thought they had it bad during the war, yet the days to come would hit every American household harder than the European conflict ever did. Jules' General Store had to let Harriet and Kyle go, adding to the community's frustration and desperation. Douglas and Vanessa went from managing the store to running every facet of its operation. Both were haggard and unhappy anytime Father Time traveled into town for supplies. Gone were the days of light conversation and happy bullshitting between friends. Douglas had become snappy and impatient, and Vanessa barely spoke at all anymore. Government assistance, like the farmers' subsidiary grants circa the Great War, disappeared overnight. America had won the battle, but lost the war. Banks repossessed equipment after accounts dropped into default, and one farmer in the area, a man named Jim Clark, had been arrested for shooting at the people who came to repossess his work truck. Another family, the Russells, drank rat poison the evening after everything they'd ever owned was taken from them. Father Time overheard Grandpa Henry telling Mama as much, and her whispered reply, like a cacophony in the quiet house, broke something in Father Time. What about the babies? They had a newborn and 2-year-old, Gracie and Carla. Them too, baby girl. Them too, came Grandpa Henry's hushed reply. That night, blue babies, their milk bottles full of death discarded beside their wrong-colored bodies, haunted Father Time's nightmares. He awoke gasping, covered in greasy sweat, although the house was colder than an infant's corpse. The headaches Mama had hidden so well for so long got worse in February. Crippling migraines kept her in bed more days than not, and Father Time, following Kyle O'Leary's sage advice from the day of the circus, which felt a million years away now, doubled his work efforts around the property. Every evening finished with him starving, aching all over, but along with the empty stomach and muscle pain came a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of pride on par with winning the national sweepstakes. Yes, their family was broke, damn near penniless, but there was always a roof over their heads and enough food to keep them active and alert. For now. In March, a truck carrying large steel drums and copper tubing pulled onto their drive. Father Time went out to meet the colored man who drove the rig, but Grandpa Henry caught him on the porch and told him to go back inside. The driver rolled the truck around the side of the barn, out of Father Time's sight, and Grandpa Henry stayed out there all day long, doing God knew what, before returning at sundown, sweaty and exhausted, his cheeks flushed with exertion, straw jutting from his beard like the quills of a pissed-off porcupine, and a fine patina of dust smattered here and there on his face. "Everything okay, Grandpa?" asked Father Time as he stirred a pot of pepper gravy. He had some pork steaks that needed the added moisture the gravy would give because the hogs weren't putting on enough fat this winter. The pigs, like the 3 humans in the house, had been reduced to eating once a day, sometimes once every other day, and there was no telling when things would change for the better. God willing, they wouldn't take a turn for the worst. "Smells good," was Grandpa's only response as he headed for the cellar door. He returned to the kitchen a minute later, 2 bottles of home-brewed beer in his fists. He sat one down on the counter next to the wood stove and told Father Time, "Get that in you." Father Time did as he was told. Drinking didn't make him happy, but it sure helped numb him enough to where all the bad stuff didn't seem so awful, at least for a spell. Father Time finished cooking and his beer, then took Mama her plate. She was sat up in bed, her back to the headboard, her feet up on pillows, bags as big as lemon wedges under her eyes. Her face was gaunt, her pallor of the grave, and not for the first time Father Time could smell something on the air he didn't like one bit. The stench popped from her pores, drifted off her in waves of nearly tangible offense. "Eat that, then we'll get you a bath," said the son to his mother. "You're so good to me," she said as she took her plate. She stared at the gravy-covered pork steaks and mashed potatoes with something akin to disgust before setting the plate beside her on the bed. The food steamed in the frigid air but wouldn't steam for long. The gravy would congeal, and the pork steaks would toughen so that no amount of gravy would help. The potatoes, he knew, would remain warmer than anything on the plate, but even they were destined for a room temperature existence. "Come on, Mama. You gotta eat something." Father Time pushed. "I will, baby," she said, her voice low and coarse with her lie. Father Time sat on the edge of the bed and twisted round to face his mother. "I'm worried about you, Mama. Maybe you should—" "We don't have the money for a doctor, baby. You know that." He placed a hand on her withered thigh. "I'm sure Doc Huntington would give us some credit." She smiled wanly and laid her hand on top of his, where it rested on her leg. "You gotta pay back credit." Her thin lips trembled, and he hoped she wasn't on the verge of tears. He couldn't stand to watch his mama cry. "It ain't always gonna be like this," he assured her, although he knew no such thing, not for sure. "Doc knows we're good for it. We'll pay off the last debt we had. We paid off the last debt we had. We'll pay this one off too. Baby, the doc." A wince stopped her mid-sentence. Her hand left his and rose trembling to her temple. She flinched with pain, then dropped her hand and forced a smile. Meeting his eyes, she continued, "Doc is struggling just like everyone else. I can't ask him for credit when I know I'd be taking food out his baby's mouths. But you're sick, Mama, I am. But I'll bounce back. Just gotta get rid of this daggum headache." She sighed at length. Her breath smelled like rotten potatoes. "I'll try and eat. Promise. Go ahead and heat up my water. Been looking forward to a soak." Father Time boiled well water and filled the tub with half cold, half hot, listening to his mother groan every time he passed her room. When he went to collect her, he found her plate where she'd left it on top of the bedclothes. He wanted to chastise her, tell her she needed to eat to keep her strength, but kept his thoughts to himself. Mama didn't need him nagging her. She had enough bothering her without him adding to it. He helped her to the bathroom, an arm around her emaciated waist, terrified at how wasted she'd become, how he could feel shuddering organs and rigid bone under her thin skin. He turned his back, allowing her to undress, providing what little decency he could. When he faced her again, the shape of her overwhelmed him. Her once soft body was now jagged, with protruding joints jutting from her like fleshy outcroppings of granite, sharper than flint. When was the last time she'd eaten? He traced his memory back and forth, further and further, and couldn't remember when she'd last touched her food, much less cleaned her plate. Helplessness throttled him. He gasped for air in her presence, hoping she couldn't tell how utterly her withered visage had shaken him. There was nothing he could do short of forcing her to eat, and his heart wasn't prepared for that. This cognitive dissonance, the need to shove food down her gullet to keep her nourished and healthy, battled bloodily with the knowledge that doing so would kill what little spirit she had left. It dragged him low, and he wanted to scream from that pit, scream to shame the God Grandpa Henry believed in so faithfully. He held her under the arms as she stepped into the tub, then eased the slender wraith his mother had become into the lukewarm water. She settled on the bottom and rested her nape on the rim of the tub. He lathered lye soap into a raggedy washcloth and went to hand it to her before he realized she was asleep. Her lips flapped almost imperceptibly with breath, a bubble of milky saliva forming and popping in one corner. While she slept, he washed her from toes to temple, then soaped her hair, being careful to keep water out of her face as he rinsed the wiry strands clean. After, he lifted her slight body from the water and carried her to bed. Father Time prayed as he tucked her in, asking God to be merciful with her, that, should he be up there with his viewing of everything, wanting to do a good deed, Myrtle Waycott should be first in line for his blessing. He only wanted her pain to end, for the headaches to stop, and he begged God on his hands and knees for his prayers to come to fruition. Back in the kitchen, Grandpa Henry had his head down on his crossed forearms, on the table, when Father Time returned with Mama's untouched plate. The hogs were eating better than any of the people in the house at this point, and even though the fat sons of bitches missed as many meals as their human owners, when they did eat, they ate well. One more plate of food would go into their trough, while those who were supposedly better than beasts starved, their stomachs shrunken and sickened by even the thought of food. How could one be so goddamned hungry, yet not want to eat? It made no sense. Father Time woke his grandfather and escorted him to bed, then crawled into his own bed, done forever with this day and its disasters. He awoke the next morning to a quiet house. Scraping sleep from his eyes, he shambled down the hall to check in on his mother, only to find his grandfather knelt beside her bed, holding her hand in his face buried in the mattress. Father Time stood there for an eternity, watching his mother's chest, begging it to rise, ignoring her slack jaw and staring eyes. Some of God's greatest gifts were unanswered prayers. They buried Mama in the north field, beside her mother, and erected a wooden cross to match Grandma's. Father Time had spent most of the previous day whittling Mama's name, her date of birth and of death, into the crossbar, his tears staining the wood as he worked. Graveside, Grandpa Henry gave the eulogy, but Father Time heard not a word of it. His mind was blank, devoid of thought, yet crammed full of unspoken sorrow. The kind of sadness that requires no effort on your part, because you're too hurt to think, much less form words. Grief was more than emptiness. He felt stuffed to bursting with a nothing that only resembled something. The tangible nature of loss so much heavier than happiness. Joy smothered like those godforsaken pork chops that, had she eaten, would have been his mother's last meal. Yeah, Chris, it's the new one. I'm about to tell you about it. Just hey, Zoop, how you doing? Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, I am reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. You can get, you can get the book at Amazon in the link down in the doobly-doo, or you can buy a signed copy from me directly. If you're in the U.S., use the U.S. link. If you are literally anywhere else, use the U.K. link. Yes, the shipping is high on the international ones, but that's just so that it covers it. It's a guaranteed cover it, and then I will refund you anything that I don't use and send you a screenshot of the actual cost of shipping. So, but the book by itself, signed, is $30. Everything else is shipping. The US version does have shipping included. Back to the book. 9. In the watches of the night, Father Time lie awake, listening to Grandpa Henry sob in his room down the hall. The young man eased out of bed and went to his grandfather, lay next to him, clutching the older man as he would have preferred to have held his mother one last time. Grandpa Henry quaked in his arms, and Father Time hoped he'd never know the pain of losing a child. Losing a parent was enough pain to last him a lifetime. As is so often the case, although grief is not always followed by such, the loss of someone unreplaceable came with sudden prosperity. Grandpa Henry started taking trips in the dead of night and returning home with more money than he could hold in his pockets. Not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, Father Time never asked where the bags of money came from. Truth be told, he was concerned his grandfather was robbing banks or something even more nefarious, and decided ignoring his curiosity was the best course of action to take. The only thing satisfaction helped was cats. Your mama's been watching over us, son. Praise be. Grandpa Henry said as he dumped this morning's earnings onto the kitchen table. There must have been $200 in front of Father Time, a mass of $1, $2, and $5 bills, some bald and crumpled, others crisp and new. Let's go shopping, Grandpa cried, and they did. They drove into town, Grandpa driving, and Father Time counting bills, finishing and starting over again, again and again, not truly believing the money existed, expecting at any moment for the hallucination to end and leave him once again poor and on the brink of starvation. Douglas was behind the counter when grandfather and grandson entered the store. Grandpa Henry spoke with Douglas, a tall, slender man who'd only become wirier the further into hard times he sunk while Father Time shopped. He grabbed 7 pairs of jeans, one for every day of the week, with shirts to match. Then he raided the food stores. He'd grabbed the last of several things before feeling bad and returning half of them to the shelves when a thought occurred to him. Grandpa? Father Time called across the store, cutting into the old man's conversation with Douglas. What you need, boy? Grandpa Henry called back. I have an idea. Well, speak it into existence, son. Father Time did, and Grandpa Henry's face only brightened further with every word his grandson spoke. That's a fine idea, Grandpa hollered. You're a good boy, said Douglas. You raised a fine man, Henry. A damn fine man. His mama helped. That's what this is. Nothing but myrtle here, by God, God rest her, said Grandpa. And, for once, Father Time didn't plummet into sorrow at the sight of tears rolling into his grandfather's beard. They spent the rest of the day delivering food to everyone they knew needed it. The shock and smiles on the faces of those who received the Waycott's charity, which Grandpa Henry would never have called such, to be clear, stayed with Father Time, became the light in the pit he'd needed, birthing something in him that had lain dormant since his mother's passing. There was more to life than oneself. Family extended to all those you loved, whether or not that love was reciprocated. Weeks disappeared and became months. The money continued to roll in. Grandpa Henry paid off every debt the townspeople had racked up at Jules' general store. Father Time ignored the feeling eking into the back of his mind that there was something he should be paying attention to, that he was out of the loop, and that, eventually, there would be a price to pay for the sudden upswing of their fate. He had to fight it down daily, having convinced himself that to inquire as to where the money was coming from would be to make the well run dry. So he remained ignorant of Grandpa Henry's nightly escapades and basked in the glow of those they helped, every one of them assuring the Waycotts that they'd return to them the money once they were back on their feet, and all the while Grandpa would shake his head and tell them he would never accept it, not in a million years. Father Time only wished Mama had been around to see everything they did for their fellow man. Grandpa Henry assured him that Mama was up in God's heaven, watching down on them, an angel pulling strings for the betterment of everyone involved. A year passed, and the flow of funds continued to increase. Only now, sometimes, Grandpa Henry would be gone for days on end instead of overnight. His grandfather trusted him to run the farm, and Father Time did so with aplomb. They even hired half a dozen field hands to help with the property, and naturally, Father Time settled into being a kind but firm boss to the men who worked under him. All right, if you're just now joining us, we're reading The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. We are only this far into it. This is the first episode. Every chapter is novella or novel length. So when you hear me reading the numbers, those are subchapters. I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but I want to read for at least 2 to 3 hours every day when I can. So if you want to read, if you don't want to wait for me to read the book to you, there's links down there in the doobly-doo. You can buy a copy from Amazon. That's the only place it's available right now. Or you can buy a signed copy from me. Just make sure that if you're in the US, use the US link. If you are international, make sure you use the UK link. You don't have to be in the UK, but if you're not in America, then use the UK link. Hey, E, just got home. Glad to have caught you. Hey, Sloan, how are you doing? I ain't seen you in a while. Picked up a physical copy and a kit. Man, Casey, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I've been hearing that a lot lately. They were like, well, I got both of them just in case. I was like, hell yeah, you rock. I appreciate it. The number one thing I need right now, guys, is reviews. Whether you love it, hate it, or feel meh about it, please leave a review, because all the really good places that I can buy advertisements, that they require the least they require 50 reviews before I can, like BookBub and a couple other places. And don't leave a review unless you've read it. Tell people what you liked, what you didn't like, all that stuff. All right, here we go. Continuing on. 10. In the summer of 1925, an intolerable heat wave rolled in, and the windows all throughout the house stayed up morning, noon, and night. One August evening, while Father Thyme cooked dinner and Grandpa Henry nursed a beer in his favorite chair, roaring engines growled, approaching from the road and cutting down the gravel drive that led to the Waycott home. Voices shouted over the din of the cacophonous vehicles. Father Thyme stood at the window, watching headlights roll closer and closer still, while Grandpa Henry got his shotgun and stepped out onto the porch. The trucks, 3 of them, all in a row, parked in front of the house, and white men in white robes and pointed hoods got out. Some of them were armed with rifles, more so than weren't. Father Thyme caught movement in his peripheral vision, a shadow dashing across the side window that looked out over the barn and the cornfields to the west. He moved to get a better look and watched a hunched figure open and then disappear through the barn doors. "Help you, boys?" Father Thyme caught Grandpa Henry saying from the porch. The front door was open, and Father Thyme could hear the exchange clearly. "We're hunting an N-word." I'm not going to say the word, said a deep male voice. The ugly word raised Father Thyme's hackles. "Ain't none around here. Suggest you fellows look elsewhere." "You wouldn't be hiding him in there now, would you?" said a new voice, this one feigning mirth. "Mind letting us check, mister, just to be sure," said the first voice. "He heard a little girl up in Washout, mister. You'd be harboring—" The slide of Grandpa Henry's shotgun clacked. "I said, there ain't no one here for you to find." "All right now, Pops." Father Thyme could nearly see the man who owned the voice throw his hands up in placation. "We don't mean no harm." "Somehow I doubt that," Grandpa Henry said. "I don't cotton to being disturbed during my supper. Now y'all are going to get back in your trucks and hunt somewheres else. Go on now." Voices trailed away, but they were too low for Father Thyme to hear clearly until one of the men called back toward the house. "We'll be seeing you, old timer." The trucks turned around in the front yard, tearing up grass and gravel as they peeled out. Grandpa Henry came back inside, complaining about how he'd need to reseed the yard tomorrow if time allowed. "He's in the barn," said Father Thyme, hitching his chin toward the west-facing window. "The boy they was looking for?" Father Thyme nodded. "He still out there?" Grandpa asked. "Didn't see him leave, but he could have gone out the back window." "All right, you come with me." Father Thyme nodded and followed Grandpa Henry to the barn. Where is it? Okay. Go round back. I'll go in through the front. Father Time, not knowing what to expect but scared all the same, moved quietly along the side of the barn until he reached the corner. He leaned around, only allowing his head to show, and caught sight of a leg poking through one of the barn's rear windows. "If there's someone in there, you best show yourself," Grandpa Henry hollered distantly, his words muffled by several walls. Father Time couldn't tell if his grandfather had entered the barn yet. Sound played weird tricks in the night. "Shit," muttered a voice from the rear window, and suddenly the rest of the man spilled forth from the opening. Dust clouded as he hit the ground. He corrected quickly, drawing into a tight ball and pressing himself against the wall beneath the window. Father Time, seeing the man was unarmed, stepped from the corner and put his hands up. I don't mean you no harm," he said to the stranger. The stranger's eyes popped wide. The man twisted, dropped to his hands and knees, and began to scurry away. Father Time called after him. "Those men are gone." Sorry, wrong character. Father Time called after him. "Those men are gone. My grandpa chased them off." "You see something?" Grandpa Henry called from inside the barn, his voice amplified through the open window. "Yeah, he's out here, but he ain't any danger." The stranger got to his feet and spun to face Father Time in the moonlight. He was young, no older than 20, by Father Time's estimation. He wore a plain white shirt with yellow sweat stains at the chest and armpits, and a pair of threadbare coveralls. No shoes covered his calloused feet, and his kinky head of black hair was dusty and poked through with straw. "I don't want no trouble," the stranger hollered. "And you ain't gonna find none here. Told you those men are gone," said Father Time. "I ain't done nothing." "I believe you," said Father Time. And he did. Wasn't sure why he did, but the young man's eyes were gentle. Terrified, yes, but gentle, all the same. "I ain't seen no little girl, much less hurt one. Them boys just want someone to string up, I swear." "That's so?" Grandpa Henry said as he appeared around the opposite corner of the barn. The double-barrel street sweeper dangled at his side, but the moment the stranger saw the gun, he dropped to his knees and threw his hands to the sky. "I ain't done nothing," the stranger cried. "Now, son, I didn't say you did. Get off your knees. We ain't like them folks what were chasing you." "You swear?" the stranger said, his voice tremulous with unfettered emotion. "I'm a man of my word, son. Them boys come back, they gonna catch bird shot to their hind ends. Here." Grandpa Henry held out his hand and helped the stranger to his feet. "What do they call you, son?" "Thomas, sir? Thomas Jackson?" "I know some Jacksons. You kin to Derby?" The stranger smiled in the moonlight. "Yes, sir. Derby's my uncle. Lulu's my aunt. I had a cousin named W.H. till some boys hung him outside washout." "I heard about that," Grandpa Henry said. "Heard tell W.H. hurt a little girl, too." "He ain't did that, sir. Grandpa Henry held up a hand, palm forward. "What I meant, son, is that hurting little girls seems to be what them boys throw around to excuse killing folks the color of you. That's all I were saying. Someone hurt my little girl a long time back, so I don't cotton to folks lying about such. Don't cotton to liars whatsoever, if I'm completely honest with you." Thomas shook his head sorrowfully. "Sorry about your little girl, sir. That ain't nothing nice. Someone hurt someone I love, and they'd have to kill me before I killed them." "Good man. You hungry, son?" "Yes, sir, but I couldn't impose." "Ain't no one imposing on nothing. Come inside and get you some victuals. We were just about to eat our own selves." "I couldn't, sir. You've been too kind to me already." "Eat or don't, son, but whatever you do, I suggest letting them boys sleep off whatever got them riled up to begin with before you head home." "We're having fried chicken, mashed taters, and gravy," Father Time cut in. "That sounds delicious." Thomas's stomach let loose a well-timed growl. "Then let's eat," Grandpa Henry said, and without further ado, headed for the house, his shotgun perched on one shoulder. Once Thomas had cleaned his plate, Once Thomas had cleaned his second plate and burped forcibly into his fist, he thanked Grandpa Henry and Father Thyme for the fifth time that evening. Grandpa Henry cleared the plate and brewed a pot of coffee for Thomas and his grandson, then grabbed himself a cold beer from the cellar before taking his seat once more. "You got a job, Thomas?" Grandpa Henry asked. He sipped his beer while he waited for an answer. "I do odd jobs for folks around Washout, but nothing steady. Nobody ain't got no money to pay nobody these days." "Times as tough as hellfire. You said that right." Grandpa Henry threw Father Time a look, and Father Time responded by nodding almost imperceptibly. Grandpa Henry sighed at length, like what he was about to say pained him something awful. "I suppose we could use some help out here, if you wanted a steady paycheck. We got 4 men who help us, but we could use a fifth, I reckon." "I couldn't." You could, and you should," said Father Time. "I'm the boss man. I run everything for Grandpa Henry here. My grandpa pays well. You sound like you could use the money." "I," Thomas warred with something unsaid. "Are you sure you want to be seen paying Grandpa cut Thomas off. "Don't say that word around here, son. We don't like it none. Don't care what you call each other, but I don't want to hear it. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Thomas said sheepishly. "There ain't no difference between you and me, or you and my grandson. That word is used to strip y'all of your humanity, and you's just as human as us." Thomas nodded in quick, up and down bursts. "I hear you. I won't say it no more, sir." "Good. Now, you want some pie? My grandson makes a mean apple. You just got to taste to believe." "That'd be fine," Thomas said, his face stretching wide with a toothy grin. "That'd be just fine as diamonds." Grandpa Henry let Thomas sleep in Mama's old room and, in the morning, took Thomas home for fresh clothes. The pair returned shortly after 10, and Father Time introduced Thomas to the 4 men he'd be working with. Frank Miser pitched a bitch over having to work with Thomas due to his skin color, and Father Time told Frank he was more than able to leave, if the mood struck him. Frank, who Father Time knew needed the money, grumbled for another half a minute before getting to work. Thomas kept his distance from Frank, which Father Time thought was for the best, and the rest of the day was productive and otherwise uneventful. Work done, Father Time fixed his crew plates of corned beef and cabbage that had been simmering away on the cook stove while they'd been out in the fields. They ate on the front porch, and Grandpa Henry passed out glasses of cold sweet tea while the crew supped. Frank gobbled up his meal, never taking his hateful gaze from Thomas. Thomas, on the other hand, paid Frank no mind as he stuffed his face. Afterward, Grandpa Henry was readying for a 3-day trip out of town, so Father Time gave Thomas a ride home. Washout was a 20-mile drive to no, Washout was a 20-mile drive north of the farm, and Father Time took the opportunity to get to know the man. "Washout a nice place to live?" asked Thomas once they were down the road a bit. "Ain't really no place nice to live in this country." "Oh, got that. That's actually an error. I need to do something about that. That's supposed to be Father Time. All right. Washout a nice place to live?" No, he adds. That wasn't an error. Sorry. Cut that. Reverse it. "Washout a nice place to live?" he asked Thomas once they were down the road a bit. Ain't really no place to live in. Ain't really no place nice to live in this country. Not if you look like me." Father Time nodded as he navigated the rutted dirt roads. Wasn't too bad there for a while. Mostly Negroes live on my side of things, or what they call Brown Town. That's how it got its name, I suppose. We that live there being brown and all, uh, we ain't allowed into White City. That's the better off side of Washout. Washout a pretty big city then? Not really. It got something like 1,000 folks all told. Most of them look like me. I keep telling my people if we fought back, them crackers, present company not included, I should add, wouldn't have a chance. But they don't listen. Some of them act like they appreciate white folks letting them exist at all. It's a shame, is what it is. After that, Thomas was quiet for a time. Father Time took it upon himself to change the subject. You got anyone back home? Girlfriend? Wife? I don't, no, sir. Father Time glanced Thomas's way, then back to the road. You don't. What? Nothing? You can talk to me, Thomas. I ain't like most other people. You're not. I know that. It's just. It's just. What? Father Time laughed. Come on, out with it. People like me ain't acceptable. Mama says I got a demon in me, that I were born bad. Far as I reckon, ain't no such things as demons or bad people, Thomas. There's just folks. Some of them folks is good and the others are bad. But even the ones ain't born that way. But even the one, but even the bad ones ain't born that way. Bad people do good things all the time, and good people tend to get caught up in mess. Grandpa Henry told me that, and I ain't seen anything that goes against what he said. Thomas thought for a while and finally came out with it. I don't I don't go for women's. They're all right, but I don't go for them. Not in a sex way, I mean. This one time when I was just a little bit, I got caught dressing up in my mama's clothes. My daddy, he beat fire at my ass. Sorry, my hind end. Father Time laughed. You don't have to mind your words around me. I cuss something awful when Papa Henry ain't around. Father Time could feel Thomas's eyes on him. What? He asked the young man without taking his gaze off the road. You're different, that's for sure. And he never met nobody like you's all. You you got yourself a woman? Someone you goes with steady like? No, I only ever had one. She was nice, but I ain't seen her in a coon's age. So you ain't got no one but your grandpappy. That's right. He's all I need. I don't get urges that often. Just the way I was made, I guess. Go on somewhere. Thomas chuckled and waved a limp hand at Father Time. Every man gets urges. I ain't your typical man. Father Time took his eyes off the road long enough to flash Thomas a smile. What's that mean? Thomas sounded genuinely curious. I'm just, I don't know. Like you said, I guess I'm different. You sure is that? What kind of white man friends up in? Sorry, uh, we friends though, right? Yes, sir, we are. Well, that right there is enough to mess with my head. Ain't never heard no white man friending a darky like me's all. So yeah, you and your grandpa is different for sure. You got any more brothers or sisters besides WH? The one them boys hung? Sorry, I didn't mean. I know. I'm just still angrier than a kicked hornet's nest over it. Sometimes. Thomas paused to collect his thoughts. Then, sometimes I want to kill them crackers what killed my brother. I stay up at night plotting something fierce. I think about sneaking into their houses and killing everyone under their roof. Men, women, hell, even their kids. That ain't right of me, but neither's what they did to my brother. You should have seen my mama after they cut him down and brought him home. She lay up in bed with his stinking body, holding him like if she squeezed him just tight enough she could bring him back to life. I'll never forget that. Not long as I live. So I got this fantasy about killing them all. Don't care if they kill me. Don't care if they kill me back. They deserves it. They do, Father Time agreed. But your mama don't need to lose the only child she got left, not to prison or a noose. You right about that. I know you's right, but that don't stop me from thinking on it. Thinking isn't a crime. Thomas dropped his head and studied his hands. Thinking about men seems to be. Thinking about them how? Thomas glanced over. Father Time was amazed at how red the young man's cheeks were. He'd never seen a Negro blush and hadn't thought it possible to begin with. Thinking about men's how most men think about women's, about taking them to bed and all, Thomas clarified. Ah, okay, was Father Time's response. Oh, okay. You say that like there ain't nothing wrong with it. Father Time measured his words carefully. You want what you want, I guess is how I feel about it. Some folks bed their sheep, from what I hear. Not my idea of a pleasant evening, but who am I to judge? God'll judge us, I suppose. I suppose so, but I don't God bother like my grandpa does. His his God saw fit to take my own mama away from me, and I don't agree with his decision to do so. My papa, he says that God works in mysterious ways. Maybe he had a reason to take your mama, and you just ain't seen it yet. He had more of a reason to let her live, is the way I look at it. All the bad in the world, and he don't do nothing about it. Them boys that were hunting you, Grandpa said one of them had a cross around his neck, right over that sheet he was wearing. God lets men like that live, but takes folks like your brother and my mama? Don't make no sense, Thomas. Not a lick. Thomas scratched at his cheek. Never thought of it that way. It's the only way I ever think on it. I don't blame nobody for the gods they keep. I judge them on their actions. Praying, well, it just ain't for me anymore. And I probably never will be again. But who's to say, right? I might find Jesus one day. Until then, I'll pretend like I love God in front of my grandpa and hate him on my own time. Your grandpa don't know how you feel about God? Father Time shook his head. Don't see nothing good coming from telling him. It'd just break his heart. And I ain't in the business of breaking the hearts of them I love. I respect that. I respect that something fierce. So, you got a man you see? Since you don't fancy women? Yeah, I got one I see. He don't know I see him that way, though. He he don't? Asked Father Time. Thomas slid over on the bench seat and lay a hand on Father Time's thigh, said, he do now, I suppose. Oh, was all Father Time could muster. You wants me to move back? I will, if you wants me to. Father Time considered this, then shook his head. No, I think I like you where you are. Good, 'cause I like it here, right where I is. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Father Time stuck in his own head, wondering what Grandpa Henry would say if he could see Thomas and him this way. He decided he would keep this secret to himself. Grandpa was accepting of a lot of things, but this, well, he wouldn't know unless he spilled the beans, and he had no want or need to even open that can, much less dump it out. What was it Grandpa said all the time about secrets, though? Only way two men can keep a secret is if one of them's dead. Father Time swallowed thickly. He liked Thomas quite a bit, but he saw trouble on the horizon, could feel it in his bones, like an approaching storm. He wasn't one to let fear control him, so he'd just have to wait and see how it all turned out. Perhaps he and Thomas would be the first two men with a secret to both survive the telling. Maybe. All right. Yeah, it's time for me to take a break too. I'll catch up with chat. Hey, Tim. How you doing? Yes, that Tim. Caught your live stream. I'm so excited and proud. Sorry, it's hard to read the white on black letters. from me. I'm so excited and proud of you for getting this out. It sounds right up my alley. I bought it on Kindle, but shot you an email last week about it. Which email did you send it to? Because I haven't gotten anything from you. Getting a signed physical copy? Hell yeah, Tim. Appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to take a 10-minute break. For those of you hanging around, let anybody that comes in know that I'm on break. I might be able to pin something. Hang on, let me do this. I usually use OBS. I'm pretty sure. You're pretty sure about what? Which email did you send it to? Because I check. Oh, was it this one? If it was this one, that's why I haven't seen it. Hang on, let me. Yep, there you are. From, oh my God, December 6th. Dude, I'm so sorry. It's your friend Tim. Okay. Oh, yeah, just the same thing you said here. Cool. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Uh, no rush. What's the wrong email? The Yeah, the Edward Lorn email, I don't use that anymore. I use well, one of them's private, I can't give to you, but the other one is churchofthechair@gmail.com. Anyways, I'll be back in 10 minutes if you're still here. Well, I'm gonna read for another hour and then I'll be done for the night. And I'm hoping to hang out with y'all after this. So, anyways, I'll be back. Cutting into my break time. Oop, silence. Okay. I am back. Ugh. Alright, move all this stuff back. Unpin the brake. Okay, so we are reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. We are currently, if you're reading along at home, we are currently on Chapter 1, Subchapter 11. I will be back live tomorrow also, probably around noon, to continue on this. To continue on with this, it's 550 pages, and we've done exactly 50. So we're going to be here for a while, but we'll get it done. I'm doing this for people who want to read the book, who are interested in the book, as not really a preview, but as a free audiobook to anyone who's interested in it. You can buy a copy if you want to support me. Down there in the doobly-doo, you have Amazon link and then 2 other links for signed copies. So make sure you click on the right one. If you're in the U.S., it's $30. If you're outside the U.S., it's $100, but I will refund you every bit of the shipping that I don't use. The $30 in the U.S., the shipping is included. There we go. All right. 11. Father Time dropped Thomas off and headed home. He ate leftover hamburger steaks from lunch and drank half a pitcher of tea while lounging on the porch. The sun set over the next hour, and Father Time stalked it until it descended beyond the flat of the land. The sky at dusk, various shades of tangerine, purple, and pink. Once proper dark came, Father Time picked up his long, empty tea glass and headed for the screen door. An engine coming up the drive stopped him in place. He wasn't expecting company, and, seeing as how Grandpa would be gone for the next 3 days, Father Time doubted they, whoever they were here to see him. The vehicle was a panel truck, much like the one Grandpa Henry owned, but his grandfather's truck was in the barn. Grandpa Henry had taken his new Hudson for the road trip, a car Father Time had yet to ride in, not because he didn't want to, but because the opportunity hadn't come about. Whenever Grandpa Henry was home, they did things together around the house, because his grandfather would be road weary or wanting to do everything but ride in a car, whether he was the one driving or not. If they needed anything from town, which was rare, seeing as how Father Time kept a tight inventory of farm essentials, the younger of the 2 men would drive the panel truck into town. One of these days, though, he'd get to ride in the fancy black Hudson. The panel truck that was not Grandpa's came to a stuttering halt by the porch deck, and a dark figure jumped down from the back. Thomas, dressed in loose-fitting jeans and a clean white t-shirt with a double duffel bag slung over one low shoulder, tapped the passenger door, thanked the driver, and headed up the front steps. "Well, hello there," Father Time said, standing to hug the man. "Hi," Thomas breathed into his ear, fingers scurrying up his spine. Father Time pulled slowly away as not to seem defensive. "What are you doing here?" A moment of uncomfortable silence passed. "Did I read you wrong?" Thomas asked shyly. "In the truck earlier. Did I read that wrong?" "Read what? Oh no, I think you read it right, but I just dropped you off 2 hours ago. Why didn't you just ask to come back?" "I had to get changed," Thomas said, twirling as if he wore a dress that might flower out between them with the aid of centrifugal force. "I clean up pretty well, you reckon?" Father Time laughed kindly. "Yeah, yes, you do. I'm not." Thomas's face dropped. "I'm not overstepping, is I? It's just, it's been so long since a man was kind to me, and you were kinder than even the ones who were nice to me, so I figured I'd." Father Time cocked an eyebrow. "You figured you'd what?" You know, come around, see if you know, want a company? I could do with some company, I suppose. What is it you wanted to do? Father Time asked. Well, you said your grandpappy weren't going to be home for a few days. And Father Time was enjoying himself. He never got to play games like this. He was too shy for it. But being in the presence of someone who obviously wanted him emboldened him beyond belief. It was nice being the dominant one for once. And and Thomas's voice trailed off as he leaned in to kiss Father Time. Their lips touched. Thomas's large and smooth and moist against Father Time's. Their tongues battled, sliding over one another like oiled wrestlers. Then suddenly, Father Time was pushing Thomas inside, up the stairs and into his bedroom, where clothes were thrown haphazardly around the bed in a heated rush to be the first on the mattress. Thomas shoved Father Time onto the bed with a playful hand. Then Thomas was on him, seeking, grabbing, his hand finding Father Time's stiffness, down the shaft, and lower, lower still. What the hell? Thomas snatched his hand away as if his fingers had been dunked in hot grease. What's wrong with you? I, what? What happened? You have, you got, what you got between your legs? Thomas hollered. He backed off the bed on hands and knees, eyes wide, his face painted in varying shades of disgust. You got women parts. I, I, Father Time didn't know what to say. He stuttered and stammered, but couldn't get out an entire sentence. His first time had been so different. That wonderful stranger, she had been so kind, accepting, the polar opposite of Thomas. Father Time tried to de escalate the situation by reaching for Thomas's hand, but Thomas stepped away, out of touching distance. Father Time felt tiny under the magnifying glass of Thomas's disgust. Don't touch me! Thomas squealed as he struggled into his pants, pulling underwear and jeans up in one jerky movement and hopping around until his pant legs birthed his feet. He threw his shirt over his head and yanked his arms through the sleeves. Then he was gone, quicker than lightning, out the bedroom door and thundering down the stairs into the front of the house. By the time Father Time realized what was happening, that Thomas was fleeing as if Father Time was something he needed to escape, the front door was already slamming closed. Father Time leaped to his feet and jogged sideways down the stairs, taking the steps two at a time, his long legs burning with exertion before he even hit the foyer. He'd let himself go over the years, only having to do a tenth of the work he'd had to do when he was younger. Never had that been more apparent than it was right now. Out on the porch, Father Time sought out Thomas but found nothing and no one. The front yard was empty, as were the dark fields, as far as his limited night vision could see anyway, and he stood there, rejected and dejected, hollering into the cold, impassive night for Thomas to come back, please come back, but Thomas didn't come back, and Father Time was left feeling hollow, broken, and emptied, as if someone had cracked him open and scooped something vital from his heart. A sudden irrational anger toward his mother and grandfather suffused Father Time, an utterly calamitous idea that they were solely to blame for the course this evening had taken, instead of all fault landing on Thomas's shoulders. Father Time had never been wanted then shunned, he'd only ever been accepted, yet a part of him hated all those who had welcomed him and his unique body into their lives with open arms. They should have prepared him for this eventuality, that not everyone would be accepting of his differences. They should have done something, anything, to make sure he knew how ugly some people could be. Thomas was a man who loved men, Yet he'd shunned Father Time for daring to be born with what he had, as if Father Time had had a choice in the matter, as if this had been his decision, his goal from the start, to be a freak in the eyes of some. The hypocrisy was catastrophically shocking in its intensity, and Father Time slipped effortlessly into a terrible state of nihilism, where all logic stated that no matter how accepting folks had been up until this point in his life, after Thomas, no one would ever accept him again. The thought was absurd, but there it was, and it wasn't going away. How criticism weighed more than praise was knowledge Father Time could have lived his entire life without knowing. He grabbed a beer from the cellar and returned to the porch. He had some baseless idea that Thomas would see the error of his ways and come running back through the night to smother him with sincere apologies and apologetic kisses. Father Time drank until he was 3 sheets to the wind before he realized how foolish he had been. Thomas wasn't coming back. If Thomas had found a ride, he'd already be home, considering how many empty bottles of home brew Father Time had gone through. He would have counted, but every bottle looked to have a twin, some even triplets, which his hand phased through when he tried to touch them, and he couldn't trust them not to spawn further intangible doppelgangers. He'd been out here a good 2 hours, he imagined. The moon was just now peeking over the edge of the world, a big, beautiful spot of brilliant light, full as could be, in the otherwise dark sky. Even the stars hadn't fully made their appearance, but that could just be light cloud cover, Father Time supposed. He staggered inside and fell onto the flower print sofa. He staggered inside and fell onto the flower print sofa that had been his mother's favorite. He slept dreamlessly until warm sunlight through the front windows woke him. He started a pot of coffee and waited for his crew to arrive so they could start their day. Thomas never returned, and Father Time didn't go looking for him. Days passed, and Grandpa Henry returned with more sacks full of money. How much they had made remained a mystery to Father Time. The longer the money came in, the more Father Time wanted to know where it was coming from, what his grandfather was doing during his long trips away, yet he never did ask. Something told him, and he was almost sure of this, that asking would be akin to twisting a faucet closed, that the money would dry up as soon as he voiced his unsolicited questions, and they'd be thrust wholly back into poverty. And then where would they be? The townspeople had come to rely on Grandpa Henry's secret income as much as Father Time depended on it. He couldn't imagine returning to the way things were when he'd had to watch his mother waste slowly away because they couldn't afford food or even one more debt to repay. The money, once counted, left the house again, and Grandpa Henry took it wherever it was that he took it after the sorting and counting was done. Today's haul was a little under $3,000 in ones, twos, and fives. Never were there larger bills, and Father Time assumed that Grandpa Henry was selling something piecemeal and cheaply at that. He tried not to think too hard on the subject of where the money came from and where it went, for that matter, so he focused instead on how much Grandpa Henry was bringing in every month. His grandfather took, on average, 5 trips a month, always leaving on Thursday and returning 1 to 3 days later with sacks of cash. He never came home with less than $2,000, and this had been going on for over 3 years. Father Time used a carpenter's pencil and the back of a thank you letter the Newtons had sent after Grandpa paid off their debt at Jules to do some quick calculating. He did the figures 3 times. Each time he got the same sum and couldn't help sitting back in his chair at the kitchen table to stare in awe at the impossible answer to the equation. At the low end, calculating 2,000 earned on every trip, 5 times a month, and there being 12 months in a year, times 3 years, the total came to $360,000. Even with all the money they'd given away and spent on debts around town, Father Time figured they still had $250,000 left over, not including what Grandpa had spent on the Hudson. There was also the income from the crops, which had skyrocketed now that they could afford to pay a work crew to help with running the farm. By his calculations, they were making another 1,000 a month in profit from their consignment deal with Jules General Store. While Father Time was still jotting down equations and sums, Grandpa Henry returned to the house, his most recent bag of money stored away somewhere. He poured himself a cup from the dregs of the gritty coffee left over in the pot on the wood stove and sat down across from his grandson. "What are you doing, son?" Grandpa blew steam off his mug, took a sip. Father Time covered his work, albeit poorly, with a single forearm. "Nothing. Just paying some bills. And here I was thinking we were doing well enough not to be worrying over expenses. Here." Grandpa held out his hand. "Let me see that." Father Time, knowing he was caught, handed over the paper. Grandpa Henry eyed the math on the page with a neutral expression. He ran a rough hand through the silver hair on top of his head, and an oily strand fell into his eyes. He didn't swipe it away. After a moment, Grandpa's gaze trailed up, and their eyes met. At first, Father Time thought his grandfather was angry, but then old Henry started laughing. "I suppose we're rich men now, eh, son?" "Yes, sir. I guess that's so." "Nice, ain't it, though? The extra money has helped a good many folks around here. I even been sending some to the orphanage in Clearwater. Damnedest thing, the name of that town, knowing darn well there ain't a lick of clean anything in that no good account of the city, much less some clear water." Grandpa's barking laughter was jovial and sincere. "Clearwater! Might as well name me teetotaling Henry, eh, boy?" Father Time laughed, not because he thought it was funny, but because he didn't know what else to do. He was caught, and would just have to wait and see how all this played out. Grandpa Henry's laughter throttled down, slowing, until it stopped altogether. "I suppose you want to know what I've been doing. Is that what all these numbers are about? Thinking you might stumble upon what it is I'm doing if you can find out how much we're making? That about right, you think?" Grandpa Henry's index finger tapped a steady rhythm on the side of his mug. An oily rainbow shone on the cold surface of the coffee. "No, sir." And Father Time meant it honestly. That part of him that refused to look a gift horse in the mouth had receded, he hoped, never to return. Veterinary dentistry aside, the certainty he had that everything would go south the minute Grandpa's secret was revealed to him was too overwhelmingly powerful. "No, sir. I think I prefer not to know, truth be told." "Good boy. I weren't going to tell you nohow, but call it a test. You mind your business like a man, and I respect that. So," Grandpa Henry waggled the page between them, the paper popping as it flagged this way and that. "What's all this then?" Father Time shrugged, said, "Curiosity? I couldn't imagine how much money we'd made, so I wrote it down. To make it real, I guess." Grandpa Henry lifted his mug, eyeing Father Time over the rim, swallowed a mouthful of coffee. "Makes sense, I suppose. But we done gave half this away. You know that?" "Half? Really?" "Yes, sir," Grandpa Henry said, nodding. "I gave away a great deal on the road. Hey, speaking of being on the road," Grandpa Henry sat down his coffee and leaned back, straightening up, as if he were proud as hell over what he was about to say. "Did I tell you that circus is back in town?" Father Time's eyes popped wide, and Grandpa, seeing his grandson's reaction, chuckled. Thought that'd perk you up, Grandpa said, still laughing. Sign in town says they're here till Sunday night. Can I go? Father Time asked excitedly. Can I stop you? I I wouldn't. I'm joshing you, kid. You're a grown man now, one who runs your own work crew and everything. Don't think I have a say in what you do on your own time, long as the work gets done. Now, one last thing before I go get some sleep. That Thomas fella, he didn't work out after all? Father Time shook his head. He didn't want to say too much, so he said nothing at all. He wanted nothing more than to unload, to tell his grandfather everything that had happened between Thomas and him, what Thomas did to him, needed to get it out, to talk to someone, anyone, who'd listen, yet he couldn't get the words out of his mouth, mainly because his thoughts had traveled elsewhere, to the return of the circus, and a certain woman who might still be part of the show. That's too bad, said Grandpa. I like that kid. He get his final check? Father Time's heart sank. Either he'd have to deliver Thomas's final compensation by hand, or hope he showed up to collect it, because Grandpa Henry would fart sulfur and crap brimstone if Father Time tried sending cash through the mail. The old man didn't trust anyone who worked for the United States Post Office. Bunch of dishonest crooks was Grandpa Henry's opinion, although Father Time never knew from where his grandfather's hatred for the branch of government stemmed. No, sir. I'll run it over to him if he don't show by Friday. Good boy. Now, before you run off to the circus, I got something to show you. Grandpa Henry led Father Time out the back door and across the rear garden, then continued on, through one field and yet another, until they reached a small family cemetery at the rear of the property. There was Grandma's grave, next to Mom's, and there was Grandpa's grave with fresh dirt piled on top of it. Grandpa said he liked to keep the ground tilled in case he suddenly went in case he went suddenly in the night, so that Father Time wouldn't struggle too much with digging his grave. When Father Time assured him he'd be fine digging the grave, or how he would be able to pay someone to dig it for him, Grandpa Henry waved him off and wouldn't hear another word on the subject. But other than the oddity of Grandpa's freshly dug and refilled grave, there was another surprise. Fresh stalks of some unknown plant or weed, Father Time couldn't tell which, were growing out of Mama's plot. Thin stems and branches with what looked to be long banana-shaped leaves clinging to the length of each offshoot. Whatever they were, they smelled wonderful. Father Time's stomach growled a response. That there's thyme, son. It's an herb. Smells wonderful, don't it? Yes, sir, but what's it doing here? No telling, really. Maybe it blew in from somewhere else. They grow like weeds, though. This sprouted up overnight, it seems. Wasn't here when I left, but here it is now. Unless you've been sneaky and planting them yourself. No, sir, I didn't. Didn't think you had. Must be your mama trying to give you a gift or something. I think she got a cookbook back at the house with some recipes that call for thyme. I've never made any of them because I didn't know where to get it. Sage and rosemary grow something wild out here, but I never did see any thyme. You want me to try and puzzle out a meal? See what it tastes like? We could have it tonight when you get back from the circus. Yes, sir. We can do that. Good, good. Now let me get your bath going. Want to be spick and span, in case your lady friend is there. Grandpa Henry clapped Father Time on the back, snatched 2 stalks of thyme from the ground, root system and all, and headed for the house. Father Time lingered by his mother's grave for a while longer. He had to tell someone what had happened between Thomas and him, and Mama was quite literally a captive audience. When he was done rehashing the entire experience, he said, "And that's about it. I'm sorry I got angry with you and Grandpa. Weren't either one of y'all's fault. I still can't reckon with how someone like Thomas could be so angry over what happened. He's different too. How's him being born one way or another any better than how I was born? I don't think there's nothing wrong with me. This is all him. Geez, Mama, I wish you were here to calm me down like you used to. Even when you didn't have no advice, you always had a hug waiting on me. Sorry I got mad at y'all. Real sorry. It was all Thomas. I'm sure of that now. His bath was ready when he got inside. He soaked for a long time, so that when he finally stepped out, the pads of his fingers and toes were pale raisins, and the sun was dropping below the hills. He must have been in there for an hour or more, his mind racing with excited anticipation at the prospect of seeing her again. Grandpa was at the wood stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled amazing, when Father Time took a seat at the table. I sent the crew home early, told them I'd pay him for a full day. Dinner won't be ready for another few hours. I'm gonna slow cook some chicken thighs and this here rosemary and thyme gravy I found in your mama's books. You hungry now? I can fix you a sandwich for the road. No, sir. I can eat when I get there. Fine by me. Grandpa hitched his chin toward the kitchen table. Grab that envelope right there. It's got you some money in it for tonight. Father Time collected the envelope, but didn't open it. Go on, you can look inside. Father Time peeked. There had to be $100 in ones and fives stuffed in there. This is too much, Father Time said. Give however much you want. Give however much of it away as you want. Buy that girl something nice on your way over there, too. Do whatever you want. Consider it your bonus. You earned it. All right, I'm going to stop there. My voice is struggling. For those of you reading along at home, we're on subchapter 12 of The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. I should be live again tomorrow around, I don't know, noon, 1 o'clock, something like that. We got to go to work at 4, I think. So I'm going to have to be done by 3 o'clock. But yeah, we'll read some more tomorrow. And I'm going to try and get at least an hour a day reading this. Hope you guys enjoyed it. But until next time, I have been S.E. Johnson. You've been you. I'll catch you in the next video. Y'all have a good night. Bye-bye.